Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our second computer literacy seminar of February 2023. My name is Caitlin Motes, and I am the IT project manager here at the University of Washington Tacoma. Today's seminar is going to be on creating a static web page. It's going to be jointly hosted by Charles Bryan over here and one of our computer literacy seminars students, Jasleen. So I'm going to turn it over to Charles and let him take the reign.
I didn't think about microphone. Where's my microphone? Where am I? Hi. So try to talk loud that way, but also this way. At the end of last week, I gave this seminar last week, which was giving us some ideas of a little bit of history of computing and networks and the internet. I ran out of time. I didn't get the opportunity to do some whiteboarding to help give us an idea, maybe a picture in our mind about when we go visit a web page, what happens. Okay, so I want to start with our laptop right here, and it doesn't really show up that well in the picture, but we've got a laptop and we're going to go visit a website, right? And we're going to go visit the popular website, www.site.com. Okay, so that is our website that we're going to go visit. So what happens when you type in www.site.com in the URL part of your browser and you hit enter? The first thing that's going to happen is your web browser is going to build something called an HTTP request. Who can remind me, what does HTTP stand for? Hypertext Transfer Protocol. What's the P in protocol? What does a protocol do for us? It's going to define a set of rules for communication. Okay, so without this protocol, there's nothing defining how I can talk to you. I can say as many words as I want to you, but if you don't understand the rules of that communication, you're not going to be able to understand what I'm saying. So HTTP is going to be the protocol of the web. The web browser is going to build what we call an HTTP request. This HTTP request has a set of rules. Interesting. I always laugh at this. Part of the HTTP rule set of an HTTP request is there's a blank line. Like two different places, blank line. That's just the structure, part of the protocol for an HTTP request and the response. Now if you're going to build a web page, web application, you don't have to worry about building this HTTP request. The browser is going to do that for us. But let's say you are writing code that is a browser. You're a software developer, you're building a browser. Inside of that browser code, you're going to have to build this HTTP request. So when we build this HTTP request in the browser, once it's been put together, we're going to then send that request across the internet using the TCP, IP, those protocols, which is going to transport this HTTP request across. Now, if we are just looking for a static web page, okay, or maybe a static web page that has a little bit of interactivity into it, but it's not going to interact with a server while we're on that web page, we're going to send that request to something we call a web server. The purpose of a web server is to host and serve web pages. Okay. Now understand the web server itself in a distributed cloud platform, a modern distributed cloud platform. This HTTP request is going to go to the web server. It might be residing on one computer or one large bank of computers somewhere. It will process our HTTP request, and most likely the web server is then going to go to some database, some store somewhere, collect the resource that we've requested. When I say resource, I mean the HTML, CSS files that come along with www.site.com. Collect those, parcel those up, and they're going to put them back in what's called an HTTP response. So the server software is going to get that resource, bundle up into an HTTP response, and that HTTP response is going to get sent back to the browser. The browser software is then going to look at the response that it got back, including the blank line, which is part of that HTTP response. And inside that response, it's going to find the resource that was requested, in this case, the web page, which includes the HTML, CSS, and maybe if there's JavaScript thrown in there. Okay? So that's going to be the standard process for what we would call a static web page, or a web page where the resource is just an HTML web page coming back. In the mid-2000s or so, another concept came up, and this is the concept of a web service. Okay? In a web service, we're still going to use HTTP sitting on top of TCP/IP. But when we build an HTTP request, maybe in the browser, maybe in another piece of software that's been written, this HTTP request, I'm going to shorten that to REQ. That's a kind of a standard shortcut. HTTP request. When it comes to a web service over HTTP, the web service is going to process that request, figure out what it needs to do. It might need to go to a database or a store to gain results. And when we get the results back, the big difference with this HTTP response, which is coming back, I'm going to shortcut that to res, HTTP res. Bundled up in that HTTP response is not going to be traditionally an HTML, CSS, JavaScript file. Okay? When we're working with a web service, the resource we're getting is information or data which can then be displayed either in the browser, in an existing web page, or in some other client software that we've written. You can write software that's not a web browser, which can connect to to a web service, get some information back and process that however you want. Some examples might be, there are web services, the Weather Channel, weather.com. You can go to the Weather Channel webpage and see the weather. But you can also write your own software, which connects to the Weather Channel's weather service or web service API, ask for the weather for a certain zip code, get that information back outside of a web page, just the raw information about the weather, or data at that point, I guess, and then you can parse it, turn it into information to display under an application. Okay. Now, sitting in between these are what we will call a web application. It's where we put them both together, where our web application is hosted, the client is hosted inside of a web browser. But as we poke around on our web browser, we interact with our web browser. We might stay on the same page, but we'll send an HTTP request to something that looks like a web service, get that response back. And then in that same page, with that same set of HTML, CSS, display that new data as information for the user. So that sits kind of, that will sit. The web application sits somewhere in the middle between a 100% web server hosting HTML, CSS, and a 100% web service, which is just hosting raw data, which then you, the client, can figure out how to parse it. As a disclaimer, this is an entire course or an entire set of courses, honestly. So what I was talking here was, again, very broad generalities, but hopefully give you a somewhat of a better picture of how we're going to be working with this process. Now, what we'll be doing today and next week is building, specifically today, an HTML, CSS web page. Jesselyn's got a lab for us to step through. That HTML, CSS can be displayed in a browser directly from your hard drive. You put an HTML file on your hard drive, the browser can display that. It just needs the HTML. But if you want to further become a web developer, you will then need to look at, now that I've created this HTML web page, CSS to style it, maybe put some JavaScript in it so that it has some interactivity. Then you'll need to figure out, how can I have a web server that hosts that web page such that somebody from their browser can type in, go to a website and publish your web page. Okay. And I don't think we've got a fourth, we don't have a fourth, we had a fourth episode in this seminar. I don't know what we call it, fourth hour, fourth week session. That's probably the right word, the fourth session in the series. Maybe that fourth session would be all about like using AWS to use cloud distributed services so that we can actually host our web pages. But I don't think we have a fourth session.
Unfortunately not.
So there you go. We'll have to kind of learn that on here. Any questions about what this is, or anything that you have lingering from last week's seminar? Fantastic, Jesselyn. I'll let you take over and give Jesselyn your full attention, and she's going to step us through. You'll tell us what you're going to say.
So hi everyone. So on the behalf of CLS students, we'll be talking about HTML and CSS, and we'll learn to build our own static web page. So before starting with that, I would want to introduce about what static web pages are. They have fixed content and they do not change with any user interactions. They are delivered to the users as they are stored on the server. Like Professor showed in this example, on the user end will make an HTTP request to fetch the content of the site.com, and the server will respond back and show to the user the static content on the web page. So they are typically built using HTML and CSS, and they are simple and fast to load. So let's talk about HTML. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So I would like to conduct a poll and see that how many of you think that HTML is a programming language and how many of you think that HTML is not. So let's go with the first option, is that HTML is a programming language. So with the raise of hands.
I'm not participating, so my hands are up or down saying which answer is right.
Okay, so we have 2 votes in the class, and are there any on Zoom? All right. So I would like to break this and say that HTML is not a programming language. So HTML typically is a markup language that is used to create a web pages. So it does not do any type of processing. It just lays out the structure and content of the web page. So for example, if you are asked to draft an email. So what are the contents of the email? What do you usually do when you have to write an email? Okay, and anyone else? We have the header.
Body of the message.
Yes, body.
Who's it going to?
Sorry?
I said you have to put who you're sending it to.
Right. And then we also have a subject. So we have a list of things that we want to put in an email. So this is what HTML does for us. It lays out the page structure for us and describes how the content should be displayed on the web browser. So with this image, we can see that this is a basic HTML page structure. This doc type HTML tells us that this type of document is an HTML document. And then we have certain types of tags that we'll talk about later in detail. But starting with this, an HTML document always starts with an HTML tag, that is the root element of the page. And then we have 2 main sections, the head and the body. So the head contains the title. For example, in the email template, that is the subject, and the body is the mainly displays what the HTML content would look like if we have any heading content or a paragraph content. So moving on to the HTML tags, these are surrounded by angular brackets, and the content of the tag is placed between the opening and the closing tag. So how typically a tag is opened is with this angular bracket, and in order to close the tag, we have to incorporate a backslash and then close the tag. So HTML tags are usually used to create headings, paragraphs, links, images, and other elements of the web page. Some examples of the tags are the head tag, the body tag, which displays the body of the content, the title tag, which would display the title of the content. So example, if you go on a website, so this particular example, this is the site.com. But if you open it on a Chrome browser and then you see that the tab is present, the name of the tab is displayed using the title of the tab. Then we have some heading tags. So if we want to add some headings on the HTML page, so these range from 1 to 6. We have different types of tags. H1 would be bold and large enough as compared to H6. So there are tags ranging from H1, H2, H3, H4, and H6. And then we have the paragraph tag. Few more tags are anchor tag, which typically defines a hyperlink that is used to create links within the page. So if I have, so let's take an example of table of contents. So when you click on chapter 1, it will take you to the chapter 2. So this is what the anchor tag will do. it will link within the page. This is the first functionality. And the second functionality of this is that it will also it will also navigate the user to a different URL. For example, in the href, if we link any website, then on clicking the anchor tag, it will take you to the website. However, in the href, if we specify a particular division of the class that we want to jump into the HTML page, it will take you to the it will take you to that section of the page, just like the table of contents. So next we have the image tag. So to embed images in an HTML page, we use the image tag, and it requires two inputs: source, that is the location of the image that would tell the HTML page where the image is present, and an alternate text. So for example, if the image is being served from any CDN or any server, and the server does not respond or fails to respond and there is a lag, so in the meantime, we can display the alternate text. So this is how our code would look like for the image tag. So if there is an image called mountain image, so src equals to mountain.jpg, that will tell you the location of the image, and alternate text would give the mountain image. If, for example, the image fails to load, we will have something to display on the UI and for a good user experience. So let's talk about how to build your own HTML page. So it is very simple to create HTML pages. You do not need any specific IDE. You can just use any text editor and start typing in, start defining that this is a doc type HTML, start incorporating the tags, and then you'll see the result on the page. And before saving it, now the only difference is that instead of saving it as a .txt, we'll save it as .html. Let's talk about the execution. Once we have the HTML page ready, we'll just right click and then open it on any browser. So if we choose Chrome, then the HTML page would appear in the Chrome. And next one is in order to inspect any errors. So if we have made any coding errors, we can use developer tools in order to debug and see where we have missed any tag and why is our code giving any error. So I'll give you an example for this. So this is my HTML code. So this is the first example that we'll be going through. So here you see the structure of the page. We'll tell that this is the doc type HTML. We'll start with the HTML tags. I don't have anything in the heading, so I've just left it blank, but I've incorporated the head of the page. And this is the body. So as explained before, so we have a couple of heading tags. So this one is H3. This one is anchor tag. This one is again like H3 that will display the text. And this one is the image tag. So if I want to see it in the browser, I'll simply right click, open, and open it with Chrome. And here again, you see that the extension here is the HTML file. It means that I saved it as .html and not .txt. So if you see this example, we had mentioned an H3 heading, the anchor element, and we had also used the anchor tag to link the user to this page. Again, see, now I got an error, right? So we were talking about debugging. So how to deal with errors? Just right click on it, and this is called the developers tool. So anything that you write on the page, this is created as a document object model on this console. So have you studied trees data structure? Okay. So it will basically be a tree. So the root element is the HTML, and then its children are head and body, and within body there is an anchor tag, and within div there is an image tag. So you can see that that the anchor tag is supposed to route to google.com, and there is a div class that contains the image container, And this class is named Mount Rainier. This is the location of where the image will be present, and this is the alternate text. So if in case we don't get any response from the server, this particular text will be displayed. So are there any questions up till the HTML part? All right. So moving on to the CSS. So now that we have created a very simple web application, we want to style it now. So CSS are basically cascading style sheets. This is a styling language used to describe the look and feel of an HTML document. It separates the content of HTML from its presentation or the style, and it provides a range of styling options. For example, if you want to increase the font size, change the color of the font size, add borders to an image, create a border radius, and position the image in a particular section of a page, we can use CSS. And these are incorporated in the HTML document with the help of style tag. So this is the particular syntax. So I have the simple hello world h1 tag. So it's just plain and simple. It's black in color and it's bold. In order to make it more look pretty, we'll use a style tag, and inside the style tag, we have this h1 selector. So how does the web page know that we have to put the styling on that particular field? We have the selectors. So in h1 selector, we'll declare the property color, we'll make it to blue, and we'll declare another property font size, and it will ask for the size of the content within the h1 tag. And in order to invoke CSS, a CSS invocation can be done through 3 ways. First one is inline. So if I have this h1 tag, this does not need the use of the style tag. I have this h1 tag, I can simply incorporate CSS within the text, and then write my text, and then it would style the text. Next one is the internal. This is with the help of style tags and the selectors that I mentioned in the previous example. It will do the same thing. It will align the text to center. It's just that it will separate the HTML part from the CSS part. Then the next one is the more industrial friendly way, I would say, that with the help of external style sheets. So this completely isolates the two HTML and CSS code, and with the help of style sheets, in the style tag itself, you can mention the location of the style sheet and tell the browser that this is with the help of rel that this is a particular style sheet. As we were talking about the CSS selectors, like how do we know that particular styling needs to be incorporated on that particular section of the page? We have different types of selectors. One can be ID. So if we define an ID on an HTML tag like heading, we can simply in the style tag refer that, okay, if you find this ID hash heading, you align the text to center. Another way to do is define classes. So if I define a class equals to heading, so simply in the style tag, I can do dot heading and perform various types of syntax, various types of formatting. Then the next one is the type. So again, this was using the CSS selector that we mentioned before. In the style tag itself, just mention the tag, the HTML tag that we had referred to, add the styling options, and you'll be done with the CSS styling. So if you remember in the previous example, we had an anchor element that pointed to somewhere, and then we had an image element, and it looked like this. So in order to make it look more stylish, we can add CSS to it. So here is the style tag. So this says that we find the H3 element and make the color to red. So all the H3 elements that are used in this document will be red in color. So this is the output of it. And we'll also play around with the image. We'll add border to the image. So what this field would do is that we would add a 3 pixel sized solid black border to the image and also resize the image, set height and the width. So this is how it would look like. So it certainly made the last HTML file look better. So are there any questions till the CSS part? So let's move on to the final demo. So this is a form page. So what do you think, what kind of elements would be there in the form page?
Text box.
Okay,
A header,
yes,
Page,
right,
buttons,
sorry,
buttons.
yes, right.
Anchor.
Anchor is not there. Heading. So again, if I open the document tree, there is an HTML tag and inside the header. So this is the header and there is a meta tag. So if you see that the name is viewport and the content is as per device's width and initial scale is 1. It means that if I try to resize it, it will always set the, it's not the correct way to resize using the developer tools. So let me close the developer tools and then try to resize it. So it will stop the, it will stop at one point and if I try to resize it even further, the HTML elements would not overlap with each other. So right, as discussed before, these are the types of tags used, and also there is a form tag. So it will tell the, so whenever the browser is trying to read the HTML file, it will know that it's a form tag, and specifically there will be some fields inside the form tag. Again, so if you see the form page, it divides the HTML page into 2 containers. One is the image container and the other one is the normal text container. So image container would again use the image of the, would display the image on the web. So what are the 2 types of field that we had to add in order to incorporate the image container? You can see from this example. So the 2 types of field were SRC, that indicates where the image is present, and ALT, that indicates the text in order if in case the image invocation fails. Next container is the ID container, wherein we have created different labels. So this one is the username. And this is an input text. So as pointed by someone else before, that correct that input tags are used to build a form page and build any field that requires a text input. So in this input itself, we have indicated that it would expect us to intake the text and placeholder. If you see the enter email, so that would presume would make the HTML page more presumptuous. So it would ask the user to enter any email. So if I click on it, then user can enter their own email. Next one is the password. So so if I write the input type password, what do you think the text would be? Would it display as a normal text to the user, or it would hide the password?
it should have.
Yes. So that's the work of this type password. So if I type my password, obviously I don't want any one of you to see my password or log into my email page, and then it would like encrypt the password, and this is the type of the input type password job. And then rightly mentioned by you before that it also needs a button. So this is a button type submit, and the button text is login. So this was about the HTML part. So also, if we want to debug, we can see the document modality using the console tab on the developer tools. And again, if you want to debug the CSS on each and every element, just click on this element, and then in the styles you can see that this is an H2 tag, and we have incorporated this CSS property margin left. So if I want to change it, I can simply do that from here and see the results. Choose the it's giving me an error that color is not a valid property. So let's see what type of color we can add. Okay, maybe we can come back to this later. So coming to the CSS part, all the CSS invocations need to be done inside the style tag. So in the style tag, we have the CSS selector body, wherein we will display the font family. We will tell the browser that, okay, this is the font family that we have to use. In case Arial is not available, move to Helvetica, then move to sans serif. And there are some CSS on the form as well. Like in the form, you can see we had added a solid border. So in order to do that, we first mention the size, the thickness of the border. Then we will mention that it's a solid border, and then this is the color of the border. And then we have some, again, CSS properties that resonates to the alignment of the form. Next one is the input type. This is another type of invocation that we had discussed before. So if input type is text or input type is password, add these types of CSS properties to these two tags. And then we have the button. In order to style the button, we can add background color, play around with the text of the button tag, and then add some padding. So padding means if you want to add an extra space within this, like if you see login, there's some space on the top and the space on the bottom. So in order to make this look more pretty, we can add a padding, we can add margin, and do everything else. And again, if you see this image container, so what type of CSS selector is it? Is it a class or an ID? It's a class, because in ID, if it had been ID, if you see this container, right? Container is an ID, and in order to refer it to the styling image, we made the use of hash. However, if you're dealing with the class selectors, then we would need to add dot. However, if you're dealing with the ID, we need to add a hash. So image container, you see, is a class. Image container is a class. So in order to style the elements inside the image container, we would use a dot, and we would go about with the CSS. Similarly, with the image, we have this type of CSS, and container is a ID. Container is being called as an ID. So we have a hash preceding it, and then a set of CSS properties inside it. So again, so this is how the final output of the page will look like. So are there any questions on this walkthrough? Alright, so that was it for the HTML and CSS part, and all about building the static web pages. And in the next week, we'll be walking you through building dynamic web pages. Thank you.
So it's an opportunity for students here to start building a web page. 10 minutes
Okay,
left.
yeah,
So-
we still have 10 minutes left. So can you open any text editor on your computers?
Bring up like your
Yes.
simplest webpage. Any text editor will do, but you want to make sure you don't use something like Microsoft Word, like a word processor, because they'll put secret encoding in the document. You want just a raw text editor.
Notepad supremacy.
What's that?
Notepad supremacy. Best coding tool.
Null patch.
Notepad.
Notepad.
Sorry.
Notepad. Yeah. Notepad works for sure if you're on a Windows machine. If you're on a Mac, you can use text edit. VS Code for the win. You're doing web dev. Notepad plus plus. What's that?
EIM.
VI. Not even VIM. Just go old school hard VI. Actually, that's my Unix text editor. It's what I learned 20 years ago, and my fingers just know what to do with VI. Like Emacs, my fingers don't know what to do with Emacs.
That's too soft. You gotta code your own text editor to make code in there.
And when you come take 380, we'll do some VI virtual machine. At least I'll be using VI even.
Maybe 380, what other courses?
305, 380, 450 for now, but I'm switching it over to 460.
So 380 is the one where you learn like multiple languages in the quarter, right?
Was it fun?
Oh yeah. I'm probably gonna do that as soon as I get into it.
Yeah, it's got some prereqs. It's usually your third quarter. If you go direct, it's third quarter and major.
What's the prereq?
342.
Oh, with the second part is options.
Oh, and I think 371 as well, right?
Yeah. Let me show you.
Your 2 second quarter courses.
So technically with JavaScript, you will usually use, or at least which is used for client side gathering. Technically, you could do the server side gathering also. You could just kind of everything just pass it.
So there's several different models. There's true just client side JavaScript, right? You can use HTML, CSS for your rendering and JavaScript and do it to DOM. There is server side, or whether you're using JavaScript or PHP or any other language, where you're using your code on the server side to build the HTML thing could shift. There's some more modern technologies, Jocelyn, you might be able to speak on these one more, where you use a framework like Angular or a library like React, and you build your components, and then those are put together server side and then served as a component, not a full web page, but served as a component. So
Then updated on component basis.
more modern frameworks really and usages and design pattern creating wherever those fly. So, same thing with like JavaScript as a language. Is it another language? Sure. Is it functional language? Sure. Right. It just kind of does it all in modern usage. And so the standard design pattern of where JavaScript renders and how you build your HTML, that's really kind of muddy. I don't say there's like a best practice, but it's just kind of Depends on the design and the architecture you're working on. Yeah. I mean, nowadays, yes, for sure, you can use JavaScript as your server-side language and technology. The advent of Node.js and other server-side JS instance or implementations of JS in on the server.
Do you have any experience with Rust?
No, no.
But I've heard it's also a really good way to build simple web pages.
Don't have experience with it. Do you?
Rust.
Just Python based on what I need to learn.
Yeah, I mean, I've never looked into it. I don't even know if Rust is its own language or if it's a library that sits on top of Python. I don't. There's so much out there that.
I wonder,
You what? I'm
I
sorry.
got the last spot in that I think.
Good.
I feel like only like.
Well, I peeked at the time ago. I was like, oh, that's so you got that. Anything else?
Oh, I got everything. My search class is still.
You're looking to start the grad program in the fall? You're looking to do the grad program in the fall? Just masters or looking to PhD?
PhD.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Because master is so expensive that I just don't get in such a level. So my hope is the PhD or get some industry space that will become masters, but I don't know yet.
Just looking at your PhD candidate or just doing a master's?
I have to check out that. So he said that with like because case there fails and most likely.
Who did you find, you know, you and I had a discussion about recommendations and getting somebody who understood your research better.
Yeah, I did find, but I really got the rejection. They had like 2,500 candidates. I didn't like this one. So I honestly was like, I didn't.
That's
really
the owl,
expect-
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a.
Yeah, no, it was like, I didn't really expect to get in anyway, but it was just fine. So,
You know, a program like that, you know, for us and everything,
and you need to get.
and you need to have a lot of undergrad, you need to be published.
Yeah.
But, and it has nothing to do with your potential, it's just that when
You need to.
they take 1% of the applicants. You have to be the top 1% potentially, and,
It needs to be actually cross-code, not just like a
that's the thing too. If we want to get into a program like that, unfortunately, you kind of have to know your freshman year. My freshman year, you have to be doing all of the right stuff for your all 4 years, just to make yourself that 1%. And you're not.
Start now.
Get into some
Yeah, get into
research
research.
now before you even get into major. You know, research,
Yeah.
which is hard. Like how do I contribute? Like, you really don't.
It's got to be.
Yeah.
All right, who's got webpage up? Who's got some paragraph display, header display? Fantastic. Hello world, does it say? Yeah. Fantastic. Is it a paragraph or a header?
It's a paragraph.
Nice.
Yeah. I got a little like. Here and there.
It really should be hello World Wide Web.
If you all need
Not really, I'm just
three of us to come back to you.
There are 3 web experts here.
Don't
Basically, what's that?
You can say it.
You can add your own domain as well. See anything.
I believe the web page for competition and WordPress, I'm still there. Oh, it's, I'm never doing that again. So nice and simple.
What's,
We have another example.
You know, HTML by itself is easy. So when you, this is HTML itself is easy. But CSS, and like, I want that button to show up over there, in my mind,
Nice run off of that.
I've never been good at CSS. As much as I try, I just am bad at CSS. I want that button over there, and be red. Why is it green?
Yeah, no, it's especially, yeah, especially for industry level pages, I want to make one div in one page, and we can send it into a full page layout, which is like hundreds plus elements, 1,000 slides.
CSS scares me. And makes me not want to do front end web development. I can do your JavaScript. I can do your back end stuff.
You put in your DNS. What is it that
I was gonna answer this one. Hey guys, if you haven't checked in with me by chance, if could you come by and check in with me, please, so I can get into the system?